Welcome back to another episode of Away from Hale. And as you can see, we have a very special guest, or you'll hear, and that is George. Many of you know him from Twitter. George, how are you, man?
I'm great, mate. I'm great. I'm excited to do this. I think it's a divisive topic. I think it's something that gets a lot of emotion for sure. I think that there's a lot of point scoring on both sides, to be fair. So, like, hopefully at the end of this, everybody listening can get kind of an objective breakdown of where maybe the points of improvement are, and then where we've actually excelled, and then how do we go going forward.
For sure. And so that topic that George is talking about, of course, will be what's going on in our academy, and more specifically, what seems to be a slew of players, Chido Obi being one of them, that are leaving without us necessarily getting the value that many fans are looking for. And I think it's important to note that probably both George and I would be considered people on Twitter who are overly positive, at which or top gooners, as we see on Twitter all the time, and don't, discredit the club or say the club ever does anything wrong, which I don't genuinely think is fair of either of us, but nonetheless,
Mhm.
discourse will be discourse. But I think you're going to see a little bit of a different side of a lot of what we usually say on Twitter in this episode, and in a very fair way, and really going a little bit deeper into why that has become the case. And I'd like to just open it up with Chido because obviously today the scholarships were actually officially announced by Arsenal, officially saying that Chido Obi will not be a scholar intake. A very talented scholarship group nonetheless, but obviously disappointing to lose a player who set all sorts of records. One who clearly made big waves, not just amongst Arsenal fans and Arsenal Academy fans, but fans across world football. He is rumored to be going to either Manchester United or Bayern Munich. That seem to be the two biggest rumored spots. But I think it's worth noting, and I'm going to throw it to you right now, that Arsenal did offer Chido as great as a contract as they've ever offered an academy player. Arteta himself got involved, which is not always the case with players at this
Mhm.
age, or almost never the case. And so I want to ask of you, do you think there's anything else Arsenal could have done in this situation to keep Chido Obi?
Yeah, I mean it's a very difficult question. I think to answer that, the one thing that I'll placate people that are really bemoaning this who have never watched. To be fair, this is maybe the one time general narrative is correct about the level of talent that we're losing. Make no mistake about it, he is on the level of Miles Lewis-Kelly and Ethan Nwaneri, and that's the ceiling. That's the level of talent that we're talking about here. So it's definitely a miss. It's no doubt about that. But then when you start to get into, I guess, the history and see what Chido Obi has been doing throughout his entire career, what Arsenal have done specifically to aid his development, and then what more they could have done, that's where I start to differ. I mean, at some point, there needs to be a line for all academy youngsters. And, I mean, not to get super ITK about it, but I mean, the idea that Chido Obi was offering fair terms, or terms that, weren't something that, we had been used to at the academy, even at Ethan Nwaneri's level, is just not true. I mean, we offered him parity with Ethan Nwaneri, which at the time was our level of not going above it. So at this point, you've got to sit there and ask yourself, okay, have Arsenal facilitated the integration in the best possible way? I mean, I think from a Chido Obi perspective, and especially from an integration aspect about what Arsenal could have done. I mean, he arrived 2 years ago. He came from Denmark, and then you're sitting there, you're asking yourself, how can Arsenal progress you through the ranks? They did everything possible in terms of at each level. When he kind of proved that he was above the level he was playing at, he was promoted immediately, not slow. He was given a lot of opportunities. Maybe some could argue last year he maybe should have had more U21 appearances, but I think you're arguing in the weeds, especially towards the end of last season and like the latter part of last season for the U21s. But still, was promoted within 2 years from essentially a U16 player to a U21 regular starter, and that is a huge jump. And so, from an Arsenal perspective, they platformed him. They platformed him quite well. When you talk about Mikel getting involved, that's not a common practice. It's not common for you to really see that. And in fact, it shows a willingness to integrate you into the first team, into a very clear pathway. And you can see the proof. It's not just empty promises, because they promoted you from U16 to U21 in under 18 months. So when you're starting to
Right.
see the proof of concept, it's there from an Arsenal perspective. So the last part is, okay, can we offer you a fair fee? Which, to be honest with you, maybe we can have a discussion on this, but I don't think that you should be giving a blank check to 16-year-olds. I don't think it is fair to do that. And at some point, you're going to have to set a bar, set a limit. And I mean, Arsenal have done that with parity to Ethan Nwaneri's contract. That's really the simple part of this. And, Chido wanted more. So at that point, if Arsenal can provide you with integration, they can provide you with a fair offer. Because, by the way, Ethan isn't getting paid peanuts. It was extremely competitive in order to stave off interest from Manchester City. So we're not talking like Arsenal are cheaping out. This isn't a case of Arsenal not offering fees that other people are. We have offered a high fee, crazy fee, and others are willing to go above that. And so Arsenal are saying, okay, you know what? At this point, we've given you an integration pathway. We're actually even selling first team strikers that you can see a pathway to the first team. Eddie Nketiah is not somebody that's in a long-term future of Arsenal. And so when you look at the striker position, while we have many people that can play striker, very few are pure number nines. And so from an Arsenal perspective, there's clear idea, there's clear proof of concept. At this point, Chido just rejected. And you know what? It will happen. On an individual case, talents like this will happen. So in short, that's a very long-winded answer of saying, I think Arsenal did whatever they could do to keep Chido Obi. I think that the problems with the academy extend beyond Chido Obi. And lastly, Chido Obi is a huge miss.
For sure.
This is a huge talent that I believe personally could have been starting for Arsenal in the future. To the same degree, I believe Miles Lewis-Skelly and Ethan Nwaneri could potentially start for Arsenal in the future. So it's a huge loss, but it happens. And I don't think he is an example for you to get angry about, but there's plenty for us to get angry about.
For sure. And we will get to that in just a moment. And I agree largely with pretty much everything you said. I mean, starting with, it's getting really in the weeds to be like, oh, we could have started a few more under 21s matches. Mm-hmm. Like, let's just be very frank here. He's not leaving because at 16, he wasn't starting every week in the under 21s. He was having a blast playing with the under 18s. He was scoring goals at a ridiculous pace. If you don't think he was enjoying that opportunity to continue to score goals and gain confidence and get himself into a position where he earned what he believed he is earning and it wasn't enough at Arsenal, he doesn't get that if he's playing with the under 21s every week. Let's just be clear. If anything, Chido Obi is probably seen as not as high of a prospect. He actually struggled a little bit when he played with the under 21s and the under 19s in the youth league. He wasn't doing the things that we saw him doing with the under 18s and the under 16s because, he's great. And I agree that there's no question this is a massive loss for Arsenal, but he is still just 16 years old. Like, playing against 21-year-olds is a big step up for him. And people are like, well, if you're old enough, if you're good enough, you're old enough. Look at Lamine Yamal. Not every 16-year-old who's excelling at youth levels is Lamine Yamal. And I think specifically as a number 9 in the Premier League, we rarely, if ever, see 16-year-olds in the history of the sport playing at the highest level. Like, it's not on Arteta and Arsenal. They should have been playing Chido Obi with the first team last year because we don't have a number 9. That isn't the answer. And I think people don't quite understand the level difference. And if they saw Chido with the under 21s versus the under 18s last year, they would see very clearly that he is not at this very moment ready to play senior football. And that's not an issue. He's 16, and I don't mean to keep saying he's 16, but I think people need to remember, and to go along with your last point about giving a blank check, he's 16. We don't do that. You start giving, 16-year-olds blank checks, and then how do you keep any 16-year-old at the club moving forward when they can just point to, oh, Chido Obi got that? And I think it's very clear that Arsenal needed to make a point that, yes, we are willing to go up to this level. We went to this level for Ethan Nwaneri. We are not going higher than this level. We think that is very fair. If anything, it's not even that fair to the club to be paying a 16-year-old this. And so Chido Obi will be a big loss. I think him going to Manchester United would be a shockingly bad mistake for a club that has just spent big money back-to-back years on under 22-year-old strikers. Whereas, as you mentioned, not only do Arsenal not really have a true number 9 in the ranks, plenty of players who can play there. Havertz has been excellent there, but we also aren't making a marquee signing there. We've made it very clear that we probably will not be making a marquee signing there this summer. So the pathway was clear. Arteta got involved, and it appears that Arsenal did everything they could to keep such a talented player. And it's just one of those things, as you said, this happens in academy football. I mean, it's not seen as, it's seen as a huge loss in this sport here, but in the States, this kind of thing happens with college football and college basketball recruits on a yearly basis to 5 of the top 25 players in the country every single year. They commit to somewhere else, and then 2 weeks later, they decommit and go somewhere else. These things happen. They're teenagers. You can't, decisions that teenagers make aren't always the smartest in anything in the world. And so it's the same thing when it
Yeah,
comes to
I
sport.
mean, like it's weird because like I don't think that you can talk it. The reason I want to stay balanced is because I want to make sure people know like this is a top talent. Like just because he's decided, and I think it's the wrong decision for him personally. I think like Arsenal was a brilliant way to develop, and I think that Arsenal in this current setup, particularly with who we have in terms of our striking options, was the perfect club, the perfect platform to succeed. I mean, we'll maybe get in
100%.
talks with about how Arsenal have done from a loan department. But, I'd even go one step further. Look at our loaning of strikers. It's actually been pretty good. I mean, Keon Edwards got a fairly good loan at Leyton Orient. I don't think that, I think he could have done better with it. But I think I look at Mika Bireth, for example, who's had brilliant loan spells at Sturm Graz and did well at Motherwell and who we handled brilliantly. And I think we should have got more value. That's maybe dictating into another part of the podcast. But in terms of just pure proof of concept, look at the strikers that you've been able to produce. Arsenal have a very good history of producing top strikers. Heck, look at Eddie Nketiah. If you really want to go, the last holder of the U18 record and what he's been able to contribute to the first team. It doesn't get much more proof of concept than that. So from my perspective, I just feel like we did everything possible. He felt like it was different. And you know what? That's fine. You don't have to slander him. He's equally as big of a prospect, whether he's at Manchester United or Bayern. But fundamentally, Arsenal did everything right in their process, and that's what I'm concerned about. If we had lost him in a similar manner to a Mario Koscielny-Dewberry, even arguably Mika Bireth, etc., there's plenty of other examples that we can talk about Arsenal's poor process. But here, in this specific case, I'm kind of at peace with it because I think we did everything right.
100% agree. And the striker platform goes even further. I mean,
Yep.
even Balogun, not only was the Stade Reims loan spell excellent, but going to Borough for that 6 months prior to that helped him with different aspects of his game, even going further back. Chupa Akpom, who, yes, didn't make it at Arsenal in a lot of ways, but has become a very successful player because Arsenal set him up to be a successful player. Daniel Malen, another one. I mean, we could go back, actually maybe the one position where we could pretty much go back over and over and over again in the history of the academy, at least in the last 15 years, where Arsenal have really done right by their center forwards and gotten them in positions to succeed. And although some of them maybe didn't succeed immediately, almost all of the big name ones have found their way to success in football. And, that to go on top of Arsenal offering and doing everything they could, it appears we've done everything right in the Chido Obi situation. A big loss. But obviously, we don't always do everything right. And that's really what I want to segue to this conversation a little bit more. Obviously, Chido, we needed to speak about. But the last few years, it's been a very frustrating thing to see the way that we have handled some of our top talents at a time when it felt like our academy was really blooming and the talent was there. And it goes back, potentially as far as Omari Hutchinson, but I'm not going to go that far back. I want to start specifically with the players who have left the club this summer, and that's Will Walters, Mario Koscielny-Dewberry, and in ways Mika Bireth being the big three so far who have left the club, and we probably haven't gotten, as well as Arthur Okonkwo, I should actually add, we probably haven't gotten the value that we need. And you and I have discussed this quite a bit. But Arsenal have been very indecisive in what they're doing with their top talents. They seem to be allowing them to run down their contract to 1 year and then being stuck in a situation with whether they send them out on loan and then how do we convince them to stay? We stick them in the academy and they just get better and better and then we lose them for free. Or Mika Bireth's situation, he gets down to 2 years left on his contract. We send him out on loan. He does exceedingly well, but then we have no leverage with him having 1 year left on loan. So I wanted to ask you, why do you think we're running into this problem? Are we in the process of fixing this issue, and how do we fix this issue?
Loaded question. I mean, it's a difficult one because I think you have to go back through the history of the academy to really give a more complete answer with this. And, I think from the start of the revolution with Markel Lusasson, which I think we talked about on this pod a little bit, or another pod rather previously, along with Per Mertesacker, they talked about setting an Arsenal way of playing. There was a lot of work that had to be done from Arsenal's academy, which Per did a brilliant job at in the beginning. And I think he's done a brilliant job establishing a lot of roots that we see that we still use today, by the way. So it's not as though that everything needs to be ripped up. But as we've progressed and over the last couple of years, I'd say in the last 3 to 4 years, and potentially even longer, there's been one aspect of the academy that's really struggled, and that's loans. The entire loaning market, our success of loans, our efficiency of loans about when we decide to loan certain players. We've let age groups accumulate talent far too long in which they're clearly beyond the level, but we haven't sent them on loans. And if we do send them on loans, we actually have more sample of poor loans than we do good loans. And now some people might respond, okay, well, is that a case of you then not having the talent? Is that a talent issue? Certainly, to some extent, there might be a talent issue to 1, 2, 3, 4 cases. But when you start to have the exodus of talent that we've had, you look at Mario Cozier-Dewberry, Ruel Walters, you start to look at Lino Sousa, you start to talk about all the talent that has left. What is the proportion of that talent that have left that have gone to top 5 leagues, or at the very least, the Premier League? You're talking about 20 to 30% of the talent that has left has actually landed in the Premier League. That, for me, is a travesty. Insane. Like, I think when you start to blow up, look, Amari Hutchinson, when you start to go far back like that, you can never predict academy development. You never can. So it's not the idea that, oh, we missed out on Amari Hutchinson. We will always miss out on £20 million kind of sales or whatnot. What I'm more concerned with is when you've got talents that are going to a Premier League ultimately in the last year of their contract, and potentially in freeze, which Ruel and Mario Cozier-Dewberry have done. Arthur Okonkwo, by the way, is going to Wrexham. And Wrexham, everybody knows the affiliation with Ryan Reynolds and that. They're not really the typical League One kind of team that have just got promoted.
Like I was saying that when they sent him on loan there, like people are like, he's a higher level than that, but it's more about the visibility that he's getting there. Is the equivalent of being a championship or higher level club. They are obviously
and they're on their journey too, by the way. And he was a key part of their promotion, and that's why they want him back. And I think that they're going to do it again, and they could climb themselves up the ladder. That's maybe a discussion for another day. But fundamentally, went to a good club, and then Mika Biereth is going back to his club, which is competing in the Champions League. I think you're looking at players that have gone to clubs that are competing at a top level, and to garner what I believe, is maybe £5 million in total. I want to be really specific. Amari's sell-on clause is only giving £3 million to us. Mika Biereth went for £4 million. And of course, we've got future sell-on clauses to hear, but these are the upfront fees that we've received from the academy, which is only £7 million, which to me is absolutely shambolic when you look at the level of talent that we've let go. When you look at also when you look at the PSR kind of environment right now and how important pure profit is going to be in terms of clubs being able to maneuver in the market. It's not that, you're talking about 5 million being land breaking. What I am talking about is I could rattle you off 6 players that have potentially gone to Champions League or high level clubs that we've lost £5 million on. Now 6 times 5 is £30 million. Yep. That is significant. Now, 5 million here on Mario Cozier-Dewberry being lost, no, that's not a big deal. But if you start to add up and 20 to 30% of your departures end up in the Premier League, then yeah, mate, like you're talking about over £30 million at the very least. And for God's sakes, yeah, I will throw in Amari Hutchinson.
Right.
You could have the odd one that sparks a Lewis Dobbins situation, the odd one that sparks a PSR-fueled interest that lands you £20 million. And I'm sorry, you're looking at Ruel Walters, who's going to a very good club in the Championship, by the way. You're looking at Mario Cozier-Dewberry going to Brighton, who I think they have a very good plan for. Those aren't operators that are not smart. And I start to push back and say, well, if you're telling me it's a talent issue, why are they going to the Premier League? That doesn't add up to me. So it's not a talent issue like what's been propped up. And I think people have actually misconstrued our recruitment drive for the talent presently here. Recruitment drive, we've actually been very behind 100%. Other competitors. So this new wave about providing a budget, Chelsea and City have been doing this for the last 4 or 5 years. We've been fixing an old problem. That's not to say that the current crop don't have talent or don't have talent to extract value. Those are separate issues, right? So when you hear people improve the recruitment, you hear of our introduction of Phil Cohen, Paulo Xavier coming in from Real Madrid to take over kind of South American influences. We've absolutely recruited new people that need to see what they're going to do from a sample point of view. But this new recruitment drive doesn't mean that the current crop of players or that we're continuing to lose. And mate, you mentioned those players. I'm going to put something to you as well. Next year, the list of 1 year left contract people include Charlie Patino, who everybody has known about, Salah Ad-Din, Omar Rekik, both are on the current tour, and I believe Keon Edwards, as well as
Yep.
Brooke Norton-Cuffy, who I can't really confirm or deny, hasn't really confirmed any pictures, by the way, or anything. So, I mean, I don't know. But he also is
I mean,
in either 1 year left or 2 years left. So needs a decision.
he's got
So it's
1
one
year.
year left.
1
So
year.
again,
I'm
right.
pretty sure he's
And
got
then
1
that's a
year.
player that has gone on 2 fairly successful loans. So now I just listed off 5 players after having a group of players leaving for free, and then one of our bigger prospects going to see their development elsewhere, in addition to an upcoming 5
Yeah.
that we've got value on in the last year of their contract. So regardless of what you say and you point to me, I'm not getting value on them. So I'm still making my point, but it could get worse. And I don't know if they're going to go for free. But I mean, it's not exciting when there's multiple year samples of huge grads leaving for free. That's really what the point is, right? And my frustration, just to end on this, is we have got new people involved, and maybe we talk about that like down the line in the pod, but those new people have been in charge for 8 months. So they don't inherit the problems of the past, but they should solve the problems of the past and move forward. I'm going to pose a question really quickly. What are our loan situation looking like from the current youngster squads? Have you seen any significant loans for people that needed to go out on loan? Haven't. And, lastly,
No, I
we
mean,
fixed the
it's
pattern.
crazy.
Like, are we selling the group of 5 that hold value? I'm not seeing it.
No, I mean, 100%. And I think, the loan thing goes as far as even the one loan that has been announced already, Jack Henry Francis, a player who 2 summers ago was rumored to be going on loan to a championship club or 2, was rumored to go to Ipswich, was rumored to go to Birmingham City, spent no time on loan in the last 2 years, and now he's got 1 year left on his contract and is going on a loan to Ireland up until November. So clearly the plan is he goes on loan for 4 months and we try and sell him with 6 months left on his contract, get some sort of fee for him in some way, shape, or form in January. It's the same problem over and over again. And you raise those 5 players' names who now have 1 year left on their contract. It goes even further if you think about it to the players with 2 years left on their contract who, if you're going to send them on loan this year, you need to tie them down to a longer contract before you send them on loan. If you send a player on loan with 2 years left on their contract and they have an excellent year on loan and they come back, you now have 0 leverage with 1 year left on their contract, because if you're not integrating them into your first team, you're not going to get them to sign a new contract. You are then losing any leverage you have in negotiation of selling the player that season, especially if you're Arsenal, a club who really cannot afford to continue to lose players for free. And so you're basically then stuck with the same decision we've been continuously stuck with, which is send them out on loan to better their own career and potentially, hurt their value with us, try and sell them with 2 years left on the contract, or somehow get them to agree to a contract extension with 2 years left on their deal. We just need to be more proactive or figure out a way to incorporate team options into these contracts.
I got an idea. Maybe adopt the first team rule of don't let them go to 2 years left and apply that to your academy talent. I mean, it's really quite simple for me. And I mean, look, you're never going to always get it right. There's going to be players and situations that, of course, lead to them going to the 1 year. But when you've got such a predominant waste of talent, that's a problem. Not like when 1 or 2 sneak through the rough and you've got a set process that, by the way, we should have recall clauses in every single contract that we have to justify loans that maybe don't go to plan. I mean, Charlie Patino's loan at Swansea, look, it had a good idea, it had a good input and a good ideology about it, but the number of managers that they went through in the first 2 to 3 months of that loans,
that's back-to-back years that's happened with him too.
And again, I don't want to be like ITK, but I do know personally Charlie was very frustrated at the way that he's been handled in terms of his loan situations. And I mean, his idea about leaving has been always something that's been on the cards, and I do expect him to leave this summer. But again, he's a perfect example. He was Miles and Ethan 3-4 years ago. That was the level that they were talking.
Right.
And obviously you can't guarantee development. That's one thing that is fair to say. You can't. But at the same token, we're clearly talking about a talent that is talented, that isn't on a lower level of talent. We're not talking about an obscure name like insert Oyatunde.
We're talking about a household name amongst pretty much any football scout in the world. Charlie Patino has been for 5 years. I mean, that's just a fact. Like, we're not talking, even like Charles Sago Jr.
No.
is not that level. He's a player who quickly gained some recognition because he got his debut, which was a big deal. But we're not like him. There's not much you can do in terms of his development, and if things go wrong, obviously sending him to Swansea, where Charlie was already having a tough time, was an irrational decision that made pretty much no sense, which just showed exactly what's wrong with our loan division, which is we're waiting to the last week, and then
Panicking.
basically Swansea must have called us and said, we need some sort of backup in case all of our wingers get injured. Can we have a player, for lack of, not getting too into the weeds on how these things go? And Arsenal are like, all right, it's better than him just being stuck in the academy because he's past that level. He goes on to play 25 minutes in the first 3 matches and then never sees the bench again. Starts playing with Swansea's under 21s. Like, this kind of situation that we keep finding ourselves in, and again, we've mentioned some new people have come into the academy system to help fix these issues, but the issues need to be getting solved faster than they're getting solved. I'm sorry, if you're hiring these people, you're hiring them because you want them to fix the problems. So they know that when they're taking the job, that is why they're being hired. They're not being hired to continue to run the academy the way that it's been run. They're getting hired to come in and solve the wrongs that we have
And I think the
kind of found
frustration
ourselves in.
lies, like when you look at the January transfer window, I mean, Phil Cohen did the best that he could. There were people that deserved a loan, that didn't get a loan, and that he did push out in terms of Keon Edward, Mauro Bandera, and I don't know who else. Was it Charlie? I think there was one other person that I'm forgetting that was pushed out in January. So they tried, was it Zane Monlouis maybe?
Monlouis went out and Rekik went back out to Servette, and then that was one where, like, all right, Arsenal got unlucky. They club misregistered him. Like, there's not much we can do there. I actually think that, and that is something I want to talk about a little bit, was his loan spell along with Sturm Graz, but I'll let you finish.
Yeah, so like I mean, like it was a good intent. Like that, I'm talking about intent. I can't critique intent. That's what it boils down to me, right? Like I mean, I'm not expecting to get value in the 5 players I just mentioned that have reached the last year of their contract. What I am expecting is at least 2 of the 5 or 1 of the 5 has been sold to date. We have 1 month left, potentially another month, because I think you can extend the selling date if you really consider other leagues as well. So like there is scope for it to be 2 months left in certain cases. But really, you have 2 months left when you've got 0 of 5 sold or with a link. So to me, it's not that it's not that I think that no work is being done, but there's no progress that's been done. So clearly work is being done, but it's not yielding fruit. And again, we're approaching a summer that, ignoring the value of those 5, I haven't seen a significant loan for me. I mean, Charles Sager Jr. is somebody that needs a loan. He's not going to learn anything in the U21s. You, in fact, made that decision last year. Zane Monlouis, another player who is not going to be learning anything in the U21s. Either you guys feel that A, he is very important to the team and you've got an integration pathway, or B, you're sorting them loans early so that they can have a preseason with their new teammates, so that they can go in and are able to, I guess, not just like, I don't know, not make friends, but integrate into a new environment. Like this is such a shock for these players. They're going into an environment that's an adult dressing room. They need that time. They can't just be expected to drop in and perform and replicate or improve. There needs to be a little bit more leeway. And I mean, academy football is ruthless, but I don't think we set up our youth in the best way possible. So, I mean, those are 2 names, for example. Even Aiden Haven, like, I mean, I don't know, okay, he's going to go on tour. There's going to be a bunch of people that we actually have taken on tour. How many of those have loans set up? I haven't seen any. And that should be the plan, because only Ethan Winery and Miles Lewis-Skelly are the only 2 that you can make a feasible argument for getting minutes in the first team next year. I think Aiden Heaven would be very fortunate to do it. He could be a maybe along with Monlouis or Charles Sajo Jr. But when you get to the maybe about getting minutes, that's when you need a loan set for me. That's how I would approach it. If you're questioning a maybe, get the boys a loan. If you're talking like you're a Miles or an Ethan level talent, which is very different because those are talents that you believe are going to contribute right away into the first team, that's a different pathway. But if you have a group of maybes, get them a loan. If you have a group where you're saying they don't need a loan, then either sell, don't clog it up space, or keep them in the U21s to make them competitive. But you have to have an objective plan and pathway for each different youth that fits each different youth. And right now, I don't even see a general pathway. I don't even see a general rule that has been laid out in terms of the loan process, in terms of making a rule with 2 years left, in terms of making recall clauses a mandatory thing, in terms of finding relationships in countries that we can actually see considered development with. And maybe it's not fair because we're starting to have relationships and multi-club relationships broadly with the first team, which actually I think we are doing quite subtly in terms of Ajax, in terms of Bologna, in terms of even Sturm Graz, actually. Like there is clearly a relationship building between like those three clubs, for example, which are top clubs that have served us well. But I don't see relationship building from an Arsenal perspective because we're not a multi-club model. So the only way to compete is through a multi-relationship model. And I'm not seeing enough of that.
100%. And I think you touched really well on the 12 players that are going on tour with the first team from the academy, which is a big step up. I believe it's been 1-1-3-1 in terms of academy players going on the US tour over the last 5 years up until this year. So we are clearly trying to get the academy more integrated. Of course, you have to keep in mind all the players who are at the Euros and the Copa. So there's a little bit of both here, but let's, for the sake of this, give credit to the club for bringing more academy players on the tour, which, number one, I am going to the match in Philadelphia. I'm excited about the fact that there are 12 academy players because I get to watch them up close and personal. It kills me not to see the first team, but I know I will see the first team when I come across the pond this year. I don't know that I'll get to see the academy players. So selfishly, I'm very happy about it. But we talk about some of those players, and I want to go back to some of the names we were touching on earlier who are a little bit more experienced from the academy, who have played senior football elsewhere. Saladin Uladam Hand, Omar Rekik being the two big names. And so I wanted to ask you, do you see this as an opportunity for the two of them, not only to potentially impress Arteta, but potentially to get some play in the preseason and show that they're up to the level of senior football and in a way potentially, garner a transfer fee this summer into a permanent move? I know we don't see the likes of Patino or Bruckner and Cuffy, who probably are the more talented of players in that group, Zayn Louis being another one. But I found it interesting that Rekik, one who Arteta himself actually brought to the club, who's been at a lot of big academies, who's been really good at times, but also is very inconsistent, as well as a Saladin Uladam Hand, who actually had an excellent second half of the year, obviously in a very low league. I don't know how much you've watched of him at Den Bosch, but those matches are a little bit hard to watch. But he really did grow defensively as a midfielder, which I was excited to see. Obviously, we know what he can do with the ball at his feet in the final third. An incredible goal scorer, an excellent, really, really great vision with the ball at his feet and able to create quite a bit of danger, but has become a more well-rounded player. Do you see the two of them be included as potentially giving the chance and the platform to up their transfer value, or just one where they had to fill squad numbers?
I mean, the cynic in me would answer very different to the optimist in me. I mean, I think from a perspective of both of those types of players, ultimately their play should get them into the shop window. Personally, I think that if for me they were key members of the first team, this would be another one of my rules that you're not going on tour, sign the contract, like sign that extension. I mean, no matter what you think, like say, there's two paths here, right? There's one path where they were signed because they are with thoughts to the first team, or they're a key member of the academy. In that case, what you're looking for is a contract. In that case, you're looking for is a clear plan. So even if you're, we're fans, we want to see these new players, but it's not about us seeing them. It's about the coach seeing if they're ready for a transition. And at what level is that transition? And evaluating that up close and personal with like the players that he can touch. Because I think Mikel, whilst you get players that move up to first team training, preseason is a way to see whether or not some of these ideas you can discover players, much in the same way to a lower extent that Marcus Rashford was discovered through injury. A lot of times you need to just give them a chance because you don't know what they're going to do. You really don't. So there is a level of that, and I'm sure that we're debating all these things. But if you are important, you should be under contract. That's simply how I view it. And if you're not going to be under contract, then you should be looking for a move away. And you should have had that decision 2 years ago. Like, I think Saladin is maybe a unique situation because many won't know. I'm sure you know, like he had a very serious injury, and himself working back from that injury has been a big part of his development. And so it got halted. So
yes,
maybe that's a situation I could understand, but people like, Omar Rekik, for example, he hasn't had any major injuries. He's had small niggles here and there that have kept him out in matches, but nothing crazy. And, that's a talent that I think the academy knows well. And you have to start to ask yourself, okay, what is your pathway? What is your point? You look at Ruel Walters, who I think is a similar profile. For me, Omar Rekik is somebody that's caught between center back and right back. He's another really mobile defender that's got a brilliant distribution, from both feet. I think particularly, he's dominant to one, but I mean, he does see the pitch in a brilliant way. He is somebody that would like to be on the ball, who demands the ball, is quite authoritative, and he's really dominant in his duels. So he's that type of player, but he is caught between center back and right back because I don't think he's got necessarily the true height. He's definitely taller than Ruel Walters, but he's not got the true height to maybe be a true dominant center back. But I mean, at right back, he's incredibly tall, and he's got the mobile engine to go up and down. It's just, is he cute enough in the final third to really end up being there? And that's a question mark, right? So he's in a similar type of way. I just want these decisions to be done a lot earlier, especially for those two. I mean, for Salah-Eddin to really make it as well, I mean, let's be real. They have to be better than Ethan and Miles. Like, we have a really difficult midfield. And if you don't see that as really likely, then for me, you got to get out. And I think Salah-Eddin is very similar to Orkun Koku, a previous target. If you look at, he's one of those small, diminutive players that is brilliant in tight spaces, a true magician in terms of the way that he's able to kind of receive and turn and be able to manipulate the ball. Like, that's a boy that's got the ball glued to his feet. But again, diminutive, combative, but you might question the transition to an adult league in terms of his running power over longer distances, in terms of questioning maybe his ability to compete in duels with people that are 6'1", 6'2". Those are things that he might struggle a little bit with.
Yes.
But yeah, I guess you're kind of getting caught in the weeds on individual cases. And for me, I just believe if you're in the last year of your contract, you need to have had a decision made on your integration pathway. And if you're not going, then for me, they shouldn't have been brought on tour. Like, for me, Zayn Monlouis is somebody who I'm shocked that hasn't been brought on tour. It's somebody, clearly the club rate. I mean, he's captain of the U21s. It's somebody that has gone consistently to the first team in terms of training with the first team. And then my question becomes, he's gone on loan, so you clearly believe he's not good enough, or not that he's not good enough, rather, he's beyond the U21.
But he needs development. Right.
And then I'm asking myself, okay, fair, maybe you didn't bring him because he's going on loan. That's not the case. He's at Colney. So that's part of, I guess, this, like, I'm trying to give the club the benefit of the doubt, but I'm seeing a lot of the same issues when we start to dive deep into terms of these youngsters. And I think for some people, they might say, well, why do you care so much? And I mean, well, for me, I enjoy the academy, and I think as you do as well. And so I can't make up things that we do well and things that we do poor. So I think for me, amazing that we brought the number of players in, regardless of whether or not there's a Copa or a Euros. Bringing that number of youngsters to tour is never a bad thing. So I'm going to be very positive about the club doing that.
For sure.
Right? I'm going to be very positive about the fact that it seems like not just have they been brought on tour, but our top two talents, and Miles and Ethan, got significant minutes, and they seem to have a highlight reel. So, I mean, that really shows that they're highly thought of. They're not just there to make up numbers. It shows progress to the others that have been brought. Listen, if you perform, we will play you. And I mean, so that from my perspective is a massive check. And it's not something Arteta has really done in preseason often enough. So to do it, it's a genuine attempt at saying, well done to the club for that. Then you start to say, okay, like, I start to look at the makeup of that, and I say, okay, how many of you needed a loan? How many of you are we learning something new on preseason? And how many loans have we actually secured?
Right.
And that is still a point of improvement.
No, for sure. I mean, even some of the players, like you mentioned, like the ones that are not, haven't been on loan yet, or in Charles Ago Jr.'s sort of been on loan, let's call it, so far. Do we have a plan for them? Is the plan, like, if they're just going to be in the United States and unavailable to go to medicals, or, go to, sometimes on these loan spells, a player actually goes and trains with the club in way or in front of the coach in order to get scouted more closely before they get decided if they're going on loan. For the likes of like a Jimmy Gower, who's 19 years old, who has not spent any time on loan, who has trained with the first team somewhat in the last year or so, but wasn't necessarily seen as a larger talent. What is the plan there? It needs to become a lot more specific, and it needs to be a clear route over and over again. Repetitiveness in the academy and in the way we deal with this is such a key. It should not be a different thing we're trying every 6 months or every year. And I think we've seen a lot of that actually in the past few years where it's been like, okay, we're going to send as many players on loan as we possibly can. Some will hit, some will not, which it seemed like was kind of the plan over the last 18 months. There have been some bizarre loan spells in there. Like, you know, Marcelo Flores going to Real Oviedo. Like that was a little bit of a weird one where it was like he really wanted the opportunity to try and impress his way into the Mexican squad for the World Cup. And then 18 months later, or even 12 months later, basically not involved with Arsenal in any way, shape, or form, and is now back and playing in Mexico. A very odd situation. Or Miguel Aziz, another one that was incredibly strange. He was sent to Portsmouth to play a position in a role that he was not comfortable in playing, comes back, doesn't do anything for the next 6 months, barely plays with the under-21s, and then gets sent on 2 more weird loans to Ibiza and to Wigan, who are in dead last and playing horrific football. Like it felt like one where Arsenal had just decided we are going to send players as anywhere we can possibly send them and don't have any concrete plan for them. And then, honestly, that's a worst-case scenario because they come back with their confidence low. They're no longer a plan for them to play with the academy. They need to get their confidence and their legs back because they haven't played professional football even in the last 12 months because they barely got the opportunity. Whereas we now basically have a situation where we can take a full reset. The academy clearly needs a full reset in their strategy, and it does look like, yes, we're trying to create kind of a network of clubs that we work closely with the first team. Can we also find a way to do that with the loan spread? And I think Sturm Graz is kind of that bridge or straddle that we were trying to do where we will we've sent Okonkwo there, then we sent Beereth there. Now we're actually selling our players to this club. Can they be one where we send some of our more talented players to a professional league, a first-tier league, but not a top 5 club, but yet a club that's playing in Europe? And we did the same, which I thought was interesting with Omar Rekik, sending him to Servette, who, again, not the biggest league in the world, not the most talented league, but a club that was playing in the Conference League at the time that we sent him there. And trying to get players that kind of experience, that kind of visibility to some other clubs around Europe, and maybe not trying to make our players, the names, household names in England where they get sold to other Premier League clubs, but instead ones who are sold to clubs around
Absolutely.
Europe.
And I think like when you start to look at the list, the one thing I'll say is I don't think there's very many people in this list that Arsenal have included just to make up numbers of the 12. Like they are pretty top talents. I mean, Jimmy Gower is probably something that people won't know, generally speaking, but he is very well thought of. I mean, I think another one is Josh Nichols, who I really like. I love Josh Nichols. I feel that he's a really talented fullback that, could definitely play that inverted role. And, actually the really famous Urian Timber goal in his rehab came from a Josh Nichols pass on the inside. And so he just is maybe stature-wise the only thing holding him back, because I think from a technical perspective, people would be talking about him a lot more if he was 4 inches taller, 3 inches taller. Like it really is that simple for me.
No, for sure.
But he's really well thought of. And I think when you start to look at it, the one thing I want to praise this summer that I've seen, at least from the goalkeeper position, no matter what I feel about some wasted value, and maybe Ovie Ejairi, who I was really high on, I thought he was a really top goalkeeper. Fundamentally, Arsenal did a really brilliant job about getting rid of the clog up at goalkeeping youth, which was getting absolutely ridiculous.
Yes.
And they've reinvested to then now, hopefully, I guess, invest in Nygaard as well as Tommy Setford. And Tommy Setford's brilliant talent from Ajax. And I think that's absolutely one that they look towards the future. So they've essentially replaced Okonkwo and Ejahiri with a talent in Setford, who they believe is going to be the first team young Hale end kind of player. We always need a third goalkeeper that hopefully is going to be Hine, who's been here for quite a while. But who should also go out on loan. That's another one who should go out on loan. But Tommy Setford is probably one that's going to split his time between the first team and the U21s in terms of being that young David Raya predecessor that you're hopefully putting your hopes on. So I think they did a really good job about efficiently moving to clear deadwood, replace with talents that you believe are going to be better. And that's one position that they've done really well in. I just want them to take that approach throughout the academy. And then once you bring them in, let's have a development plan for Nygaard and Setford with clear objectives. If they get to a point where they fail or they improve, obviously, and they improve, promote them. Get them tied on a long-term deal. That's easy. If they fail, then understand they've got 2 years left until a decision needs to be presented to them. If they're unwilling to sign contracts, then don't send them on loan and get rid of them. And make the process a little bit more resolute. Add a little bit more recall clauses. be a little bit more specific in how you're handling these youth, and don't let there be a potential clog up in the future. That's really what it comes down to. So once you've done the cleanup, brilliant. But let's have really specific plans for Nygaard and Setford that have really clear objectives. And if they fail or they don't, there's consequences. And that's really clearly communicated. Like, I need to see that, and we'll never get those details. I don't need to hear that, by the way. I don't mean I need to hear that from somebody, but I need to see indirect.
We just want to see it in action. Like, they don't need to spell it out to the fans. The fans will get it.
And
when
we don't
we see it happening.
Groups of people leaving
get it
for
now
free,
that it's
or
not
groups
happening.
of people entering the last year of their contract.
Correct.
Like, that's the indirect way that we can see that the academy is working well. We can start to see loans that are becoming successful. I think Sturm Graz is a brilliant example of us developing a relationship that is now starting to blossom. And Sturm Graz have now confidence that they're getting really good players from Arsenal, and they're playing at a very good level. So I think Sturm Graz is somebody, or a club rather, that Arsenal have done a brilliant job at building a relationship with. Let's do more of that. I mean, I want to see the same done in the Portuguese league. I think the Portuguese league, in terms of integration, is a really high hit rate for talent. Let's find a really good second tier, first tier Portuguese team that we feel plays the right way, develops talent in the right way, and let's start sending to try to build a relationship there. Another one in the championship. We need to find a championship club or a League One club that we're really confident play the right way and that we can trust youth in. And it's never going to be completely perfect. But let's just attempt to build these relationships, because you can see it with Sturm Graz. I'd like more, and it's great. So let's do more. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of putting demands on maybe a Phil Cohen, Paulo Xavier, all these new recruitment staff that we've recruited. I actually don't believe that there's a huge recruitment problem from a youth perspective at Arsenal. I think, like, okay, it's great that we've got the budget now, and we've clearly gone after or attempted to go after Makito from Chelsea, Rio Nagamua. We tried to do these big talents. So I don't see an issue. We've even got Cedric O'Neill, who were successful with through Phil Cohen. Yep. So, I mean, look, we've changed it. I don't think that there's anything to change. It's brilliant. We've got a good mind towards recruitment with some objective evidence of it working, right? We've got objective evidence of that idea being put to use. Now, I just need to see the loans being done. I need to see a little bit of a cleanup in the U21s, which I think is still a little bit clogged, if I'm being really honest, in terms of people that are ready. Like, I look at Omar Rekik, that he shouldn't go back. You know, I look at Zayn Monlouis.
No,
I don't think Zayn Monlouis should go back. So.
I mean, we even saw with the likes of like Taylor Foran, Henry Jeffcott in the last couple of years, where it's like Arsenal clearly, by the way they either loaned the player out or by the way they were being used, Arsenal clearly decided these players are not of the level. These players' loan spells haven't gone the way they wanted them to. The development has kind of reached its peak as it's going to reach at Arsenal. They're not of the level. Meanwhile, you have Taylor Foran sitting around for an extra year after already having gone on loan and played on loan, either clogging up the under-21s, playing not enough with the under-21s, and just basically diminishing his own value. And actually hurting his future career by being stuck with the under-21s selfishly for himself. Henry Jeffcott goes on loan to play for Derby County's under-21 side. Those types of loans do not make any sense to me. Keto Taylor-Hart is another one who's basically spent the last 2 years in some mix of exile, Siberia, and still maybe hoping and holding on that there's a player there. Like, I think when push comes to shove, and when you take this whole conversation and put it into one word, it's decisive. Arsenal are not being decisive in any single way, even though they're making decisions, but not being decisive. And I think there's a clear difference between those two things, whereas their actions are showing the decisions that everyone has made, but they're not actually being actionable in those decisions themselves. And as you said,
what it is.
100%. And I think, they're doing things here and there, like obviously the Cedric O'Neill, and they went for this other young striker, Corin Madden from Northern Ireland. They're obviously, putting an emphasis on getting the best talents from Northern Ireland, which I think is an interesting move. And I'd like to see where that goes. As you mentioned, they're going after top talents that seem interested in leaving other clubs in England and around, Europe. And I think Tommy Setford's a good example of that. Lucas Nygaard's a good example of that. They're making those kinds of decisions. Now, the question is, are they not good at identifying when a talent's development has stopped? No, I don't think that's the answer. I think they're having trouble saying goodbye. And I think that's not only hurting the club, but it's hurting the players. And I just hope that under this new regime of sorts, although Per Mertesacker is still in charge, but there's a bit of a new regime at the club. We can make the right decisions moving forward, because it's also going to hurt our recruitment if young talents and agents see some of our young players not getting opportunity, whether that's on loan or with the under 21s. And we need to show that we're not only do we have top talents at the academy, but we're actually using them correctly. Those are two very different things. And I think you said that at the beginning. Talent is not the issue. Yes, there are certain places where I think talent could get better. I think we've had a long history of struggling with defensive talent at Arsenal. That has never been our best thing at Hale end. We're obviously known better for midfielders and incredibly high technical level players and strikers. We've shown good pathway to. But if we can figure out how to best develop them to succeed at other clubs as well as to succeed at our own, then I think we have solved the issue in the best way possible.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, it just comes down to, I think, Arsenal being, like we said, more decisive, being proactive, not reactive, towards certain things, and ultimately, from an Arsenal perspective, we just want to see them attempting to fix the problems of the past, not repeat some of the same mistakes. And, maybe it's not fair quite yet, but there's a group of 5 people that I've said, I'm going to lay the gauntlet out. Like, how many of them are we going to extract value from? They're clearly not part of the plans. And, they're clearly not talents that we believe are going to take us to the next step. So that's fine. It happens that you don't have to have a Miles every single time. But with those players, by the way, I don't need them to garner me £20 million. But yeah, £2 million with a 25% release clause, sell-on clause, that's doable. Let's do it.
Sell-on, yeah.
Like, get me at least between those 5 players, $5 million. Which, if anybody had an idea, like, that's 100%. A minimum requirement that's feasible. That's not something that you're asking quite a bit from. And then start to approach this pathway where I talked about. Let's define talents as the Miles and Ethan, let's call it, which are surefire first-team entry talents, right? That's your Chido Obis. That's your Max Dowling. No one is really into that. That's maybe the 1%, 5% of talents that we have. That's an easy pathway, right?
Of course.
Then the maybes. That is probably your biggest clog and the biggest issue right now. I think the talents that just aren't good enough, no one cares. And I think that's not the talent that really I'm frustrated with, because you lose them, then we're never going to give you value. But the maybes, that has been an issue for Arsenal for years. So let's have a certain set of criteria, which I would put forward as saying, in the last 2 years of your deal, you need to be told whether or not you have an idea or an integration pathway to the first team. If you don't, then go and get value. Don't let them run into the last year of their contract. Get them out, and make sure that when you are loaning them, let's make sure that we're loaning them, if they are part of the first team, we're loaning them to people that we believe are going to facilitate their development. That's really what it comes down to. And if we do more of that than we do less,
100%.
then you're going to see a lot more praise for the way that we're handling things. And I'm optimistic by these new people, because I don't want them to fail. Like, I hope that they do, So I'm really keenly looking to see what we can do. I don't know about you. I think the only player that I'm really insistent on in the U21s that I think is absolutely not ready is going to be Charles Sager Jr., going to probably be Zayn Monlouis. And I am struggling. I don't think Michael Rosiak is quite ready, so I'm not going to say he's for sure has to be out on loan. But those are 2 players that I can confidently tell you right now that have been on loan that need to get out of there. In addition to the 5 that
100%
are in the last year of their contract that we need sorted.
Right.
But beyond that, let's make sure those 2 players get loans, and good loans at that. We failed Charles previously. Let's make sure we don't fail him again. Zayn Monlouis, he's the leader of your U21s. He was captain of the U21s. He's beyond this level. Let's make sure that we're getting him a real proper loan that we think that could actually aid his development. If you see him, if you don't, sell him.
I mean, I would probably add Keon Edwards to that list. I think the under 21 level is.
I feel like we need decisions on.
Right. Last year, their contract. Yeah. And it's crazy because I think for a while, and maybe this is just our Arsenal fan PTSD and not necessarily the club, like the Serge Gnabry thing kind of shook everyone, where it's like, oh, this was an academy player that we totally mismanaged and didn't get a big enough fee, and he turned into this world beater. But Arsenal actually used to do this quite well. I actually recently did a little piece on the last time we won the Premier League 2, which was in 2017, 2018. And that included players like Jeffrey and Adelaide, who was a maybe for a long time, someone who seemed like he was ready for the first team, did never quite, found his footing with the first team. So we ended up selling him for 1.6 million euros. We ended up having a 25% sell-on clause with him and ended up, garnering 4 or 5 million euros for him. Xavier Amechi, another one who kind of forced his way out, but we got, a couple million euros for him. The list goes on. Danielle Mullen, Chupa Akpom, Josh DeSilva, Ben Sheaf, Christian Bielek, all these players we actually got a fee for, and they have found success here and there in the championship, abroad, wherever it might be. It's actually something that we did quite well for a long time, and I think people were like, oh, how are we letting this player go for such a small amount? But those amounts are very key to running an academy successfully. You're not going to jump from losing all your players on a free to selling players for 15, 18, 20, 25 million euros. That's not how it goes. You need to actually establish yourself as someone who makes decisions on players. That gives you leverage in negotiation because you're showing other clubs that this is how we do it. This is how we get it done. If you want this player at this stage, this is what they cost. XYZ. I mean, they have this many years on contract that we can keep talking about the same things over and over again. But I think it's key to remember that we actually used to be pretty good at doing this as a club. And I don't think fans remember that. I think fans remember, oh, I thought Jeffrey Adelaide was so good. He should have been at Arsenal. We should never have let him go. No, we actually made a decision on him. And that was the right decision, as you can see.
I've got a really simple...
And that's it. Not every one of your favorite...
Yeah, I've got a really simple math thing for you. So the 4 million that we garner from Mika Biereth, who again is undervalued, but I digress. The 4 million would have paid for every single one of the new Cedic O'Neills, Tommy Setfords, Nygaards. That paid for that. The entire intake of the last year was paid for by one player sale. That to me is pretty impactful. Let alone the 5 that you're going to get.
And I think fans don't realize that like those things are a part of the budget that affects transfers and what we do in the summer for the first team. Like, I think fans don't understand that this is all one corporation, for lack of a better term, where the books have to be balanced here, there, or everywhere. And so if we want the academy to get better, we need to put money into the academy. If we need to put money into the academy, we need to get that money from somewhere. So if we're able to get that money from selling a Mika Biereth for £4 million, then great. We did it. We got it done. We're able to input that there. That's not going to maybe help our summer transfer budget, but it's also not going to hurt our
I'll go one step further. I think it does like distinctly help because, again, when you're talking about 5 talents, again, £4 million won't change your life. 20 to 30 million pounds may. And if you're talking about £4 million on 4 or 5 players per year, do the math, mate. Like, you're talking 16 to 20 million pounds, and that becomes significant. That becomes what we're trying to sell Reece Nelson for, if you want to really put it in that perspective.
Right. Well, even look at Joe Willock. The summer we sold Joe Willock, that money went right back into 100%. Buying Martin Odegaard, right? Like, yeah, people were, oh, Joe Willock, we needed Joe Willock. Like, he was a great academy player. Yes, he didn't fit the team correctly. We were decisive. He had a great loan spell, and we were like, okay, his value is at a peak. We're going to sell him at a peak. We're going to bring in a player that we like more.
About how to handle talent.
100%. And again, I think it's one of those where it feels so distant, but this was not something Arsenal were always bad at. It's something we kind of fell into a bad way of handling things. I think we had a lot of talent at once, and we kind of just let it slip by us, but it's not too late. It's never too late to fix the issue. And I actually think, to round out the whole conversation, to bring it back to where we were, I actually think we were being decisive with Chido. We decided you are the best academy player. You are the top level. We are going to offer you the absolute best thing we can offer you, to everything we can. That's the decision we've made about you. And not every decision, just because you make it, is going to go your way, but at least we were being decisive. And that's all to say that hopefully that's the sign of more good things to come. Hopefully over the next month, hopefully the next time that you and I chat on a podcast, when we talk about, we're more positive and we've made decisions and we're excited about this year at the academy.
Couldn't agree more. And you know what? I'm excited. Hopefully we get to do this again in the near future, because I love talking about talent. And maybe in the future, I don't know if your audience is interested, but like maybe we can do a little breakdown about exciting youth that we're interested in, and that maybe people don't know of, because that's always something that I'm sure fans get excited about.
Oh, for sure. That'll definitely be coming soon. George, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, if you listen to this and you don't follow George, I don't believe you. You should be. His Twitter handle will be probably on the screen, but at the very least also below in the comments, and I will tweet it out as well. But it's at GeorgeV_AFC. You should go listen to the Cannon pod that he's a part of as well. They do some awesome stuff. George, any last words
Thank you so
for the
much.
group?
Like, honored to be here, and I hope everybody learned something new about the academy. Whether or not we maybe agree or disagree on certain points, hopefully, like, we can all agree that we're just pushing to try to improve something that's a marginal gain. And I think that could be important to us. It's one of the pillars, right? You've got the women's team, we've got the men's team, and we've got the academy. Those are like one of the pillars of the club. So hopefully we're able to transition, and we're hopefully able to see a little bit more improvement in the near future.
For sure. And if anything, if this is the worst thing that we have to talk about because Arsenal's finally in a great place, then God bless us. All right, George, thanks so much, man. And we will talk soon.